Hello and welcome to a Monday Night Football Showdown slate between Jared Goff and Aaron Rodgers. I'm Adam Levitan, as always, joined by the Showdown version himself, Cody Main, joined by the Dinkbot himself, Drew Dinkmeyer. Cody, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Adam. It's going to be a tough show to top from Thursday, where you guys both crushed your flag plants, and I think the listeners had a good night, and I wound up on Kyle Rudolph somehow.
Wait. Drew crushed it. Who was Drew's flag plant?
I had Slate, and I mean, it was fingertips away from the optimal. Yeah. But I mean, he did fine. He wasn't in the winning lineup though, so I don't even know if we can give a crush. But literally, the fingertips were he would have been the optimal captain if he could just reel one in.
Terry McLaurin, of course, popping in both the age model and the PSM, and he gets there as the optimal captain. No doubt. Tonight, it's tricky, man, because we have a Packers team coming off of one of the most surprising and worst performances I've seen from a good NFL team in a very long time. And you have a Lions team who everybody expects to be the second worst team in the NFL, but did mount a big comeback last week. Anyways, Drew, how's it going this evening?
It's good. It's good. It's got to be better than catching Zach Wilson live. So, I'm here with you guys. That's where I was yesterday. Good Lord.
Imagine missing an NFL slate for a Zach Wilson versus Mac Jones game. I mean, there must be something wrong with you.
Hey, man, when you get offered Sweet Life for free, sometimes you take it up and just test it out.
Yeah, I have to agree to disagree. They'd have to pay me to go. They'd have to pay me to go to an NFL game, Sweet Life, or not. By the way, I should mention, Drew has been slaving away at the NBA preparations. 2 weeks away from preseason, I believe. 1 month away from actual NBA starting. If you're interested in NBA, we'll have news on that soon. Draft kit will be up very soon. Gallagher's top 150 and more. Also, if you're interested in NFL content, more of it, weekly and monthly packages are both up right now. Let's get into it here, Cody. How do you think about this slate as a whole, where we have one team that has no wide receivers and another team which arguably has the best wide receiver in the NFL?
Yeah, these slates are really tricky when you get into double-digit underdogs and a team that you don't have much confidence in, and really any of their skill position players, maybe one, and quarterback play is suspect at best. You're going to really find yourself, if you're hand building especially, or even in optimizers, landing on a lot of 5-1, 4-2 favorite-heavy teams, and it feels good. It feels right because we kind of all expect Green Bay to come in and crush, but I think the field might be overusing that today. So you're going to have to find some spots on the Lions that you feel good about, and maybe not necessarily go strong 4-2 Lions heavy or even 5-1 Lions heavy, but maybe more balanced, because I think even being balanced on a slate like today is going to get you a little bit contrarian and away from the field. We saw last year that roughly 26% of the field used 5-1 in double-digit favorite game, where there was a spread of double digits. So I would expect that to be even higher on a slate like tonight with the options that we have from Detroit. So if we got 30% of the field already building 5-1 Packers lineups, then very easy way to get different is just to go a more balanced approach.
Yeah, I mean, you don't even have to go 4-2 Lions tonight. We've talked a lot about these 4-2 underdog stuff. You don't even have to do that tonight. To be contrarian, Dink, how do you think about slates like this as a whole, where we have one massive favorite?
Yeah, I think the thing that exacerbates this whole situation that Cody's referring to is not only the fact that Green Bay is such a massive favorite, but you've got this wide receiver rotation situation going on in Detroit that's very difficult to project. They, as a group, weren't earning a ton of the targets last week. It was a lot of running backs and tight end targets as well. And so you get kind of these muddled projections for all of these Detroit skill guys, which make all of them kind of, individually not going to pop into optimizers or when you're running these things. So I think it's a slate that you have to sort of take an approach, at least running, if you're running lots of lineups, kind of grouping out lineups as to kind of game script ideas. And this is something that I will do from time to time, but in lineups that you think essentially the game's going to be more competitive, I think those lineups are going to be ones where it's actually more favored towards Green Bay players. In lineups where you think the game is going to be a really big blowout for Green Bay, I think you might actually want to kind of limit your Green Bay exposure there and hope that they're just running the ball down the Detroit Lions' throat over and over again with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. Like we've talked about before, when the running backs are getting carries, it's only one person getting points on those plays. And so if Detroit's playing from catch-up mode, Green Bay's just establishing the run the whole game, that's when you get into these builds that are going to favor Detroit more, even if their production is really spread out, just because there's going to be more PPR points available. So I think you really want to take kind of a position on how you think the game is going to play out and build lineups accordingly.
Okay. At quarterback, I think it's going to be pretty difficult to get away from Aaron Rodgers. We have him at 76% total ownership. Aaron Rodgers played an awful game on Sunday. This is an ultimate bounce back spot. I mean, the personnel matchups are absolutely ridiculous. Cody, how are you thinking about the quarterback position tonight, both Rodgers and Goff?
Yeah, I think Aaron Rodgers is a no-brainer. Obviously, when you're starting hand builds, when you're starting single entry and 3 max lineups, it's going to be very difficult to get away from him. But as we've seen in some of these large field tournaments, just by simply Xing out the most popular option, one of the most expensive options, you get yourself different, and you start building more unique lineups. So I think Aaron Rodgers won't necessarily be overplayed as a flex option tonight. I think his ownership's about right, about what it should be, given how often quarterbacks land in top lineups. But I do think he will be overplayed as a captain, just given how concentrated the target shares are in Green Bay and how concentrated that offense is. So I think an easy way to leverage that is just if you kind of X out, if you will, Aaron Rodgers captain lineups, and just spread that ownership between Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones and even some of these cheaper guys that have a path to get there. I do think, however, as kind of Drew alluded to, it's interesting to consider some of these Jared Goff lineups, which doesn't feel right. But if they're playing so far from behind, we saw them run, I think, 84 offensive plays in week 1. Now, that game script was a little wacky in and of itself, but I think if you get more passing attempts from the Lions, you could see this 302 type game from Jared Goff and a come from behind effort. So I will have a little bit of captain ownership with what Goff is projected at right now, but both of these quarterbacks feel like flex options at best to me.
Jared Goff is not Jared Goff sucks, don't get me wrong, but he's not incapable, as we've seen, of moving an NFL offense. He's not I'm trying to think of a guy who was stone cold incapable of ever having 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. We know Jared Goff is very, very capable of that, and there's a lot of different ways that it can go. He could be more efficient than we thought, or he could soak up a lot of garbage time. I like to think about Goff lineups tonight for sure. Dink, what do you think about Goff tonight and any other quarterback takes?
Yeah, so I totally agree with Cody in terms of the way to approach the slate. And with Showdown, you're often looking for small things that you can leverage the rest of the slate on, because it's just one game and you don't have a lot of options to really pull the levers and figure out where to go. And so I think getting away from Aaron Rodgers at the captain spot is one of the ways that makes the most sense. I think focusing in on his skill players as potential captain options, and then using Goff kind of in the flex play, paired with one or two of the Detroit receiving options, I think makes a lot of sense.
We'll get to wide receiver in a second, but Tyrell Williams is not playing in this game either. I mean, there's just an absolute dearth of wide outs for
Khalif Raymond, who got the most snaps, is dinged up too. Even the guys that they have playing aren't particularly healthy. It's just such a mess for Detroit.
Okay. Running back position gets really interesting because we saw the Lions, as expected, get a huge target share to their running backs, right? And so we have huge upside on DeAndre Swift. When you think about how a running back can get to 30, 40 points, it is through the way that DeAndre Swift plays the game. On the other side, Aaron Jones, I think, also plays the game in that way. Aaron Jones getting 3, 4, 5 catches in this game, I think, is well within the meaty part of his range. So I have a lot of interest in Swift. I have a lot of interest in Aaron Jones. I'm sure everybody else does also. And then we have backups who are going to play. AJ Dillon's going to play plenty. Jamal Williams is going to play probably even more than AJ Dillon does. So what do you think about the running backs, Cody?
Yeah, it's pretty surprising to your point on Swift. He actually got cheaper. His showdown salary dropped by $1,000. Obviously, this matchup is probably equally as difficult for him. But the way that he scores his fantasy points, we are not necessarily concerned about the matchup or even the spread. He handled almost 100% of the long down and distance snaps. He handled 100% of the 2-minute offense. So if he's going to be on the field for those snaps where he's going to get heavily targeted, definitely interest there as far as captain exposure goes. I think he will be a little bit higher owned than some might expect as a 12-point running back that's an underdog. He projects pretty well. The price is fairly attractive, so I think he's going to catch enough ownership, but I think that's a good place to start. As far as Aaron Jones, if you want to take some of that Aaron Rodgers captain exposure and divvy that up to Aaron Jones, I think he'll be the lowest owned of the Packers' big three. And one way to get different with Aaron Jones is just to match him up with A.J. Dillon in the flex. We're not really 100% sure of what A.J. Dillon's role is going to be, but we kind of had this situation last year with Jamal Williams. So if he even slides into that and what we expect to be a better matchup, you've got a $3,000 A.J. Dillon in a game environment, a game script that they might just be running the ball in the entire third and fourth quarter. 3,000. He's got a good projection, and I don't think, especially hand builders, people that are grouping things out, I don't think they're going to land on that Aaron Jones at captain plus A.J. Dillon in the flex.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think I was thinking about the narrative that most people are thinking of their head in this game when they're building lineups. I think the narrative most people think it's going to be is Packers get a big lead, garbage time points to Swift and Hockenson. Like that's just what everybody assumes it's going to be. That's what it was last week. So I think that'll be a really common build with Swift and Hockenson, and then mixing, matching some Packers with that. Dink, any interest in Jamal Williams, A.J. Dillon, stuff like that on this slate?
Yeah, I think what Cody said there in terms of pairing Dillon and Aaron Jones together is pretty interesting to me. And especially in terms of like, I think you could do, if we're talking about 3-3 builds, kind of more balanced builds, if you did something like Aaron Jones and the captain, A.J. Dillon with him, and then like Devontae Adams, and assume Devontae Adams soaks up like all of the receptions for Green Bay and maybe the one touchdown if they score a passing touchdown, and then the running backs get the other touchdowns. Like you can start to paint a pretty clear scenario where those are the three guys in the Packers lineups, and that fades a really, really heavily utilized Aaron Rodgers. And so I think those are really, really interesting builds, just generally. And then in terms of Jamal Williams, I mean, revenge spot, right? He went viral with the interview clip, which was awesome, talking about how you just take advantage of opportunities in life, and when people love you, you just give the best you can for them. But I think we saw Green Bay struggle against the run last year. We saw them struggle against the run in week 1. We know that Dan Campbell is going to want to establish the run. Like that's the type of football he wants to play. So it's just a matter of how long can they continue to play that football during this game? Like how much can Detroit's defense slow down Green Bay's offense to allow them to continue to just pound the ball on the ground? Because I think that's really what Detroit wants to do. And so I think Jamal Williams is still squarely in play as well. I do expect that he'll be less utilized than Swift, and by a decent margin, because of the game scripts that people are playing. And as we saw last week, even in that exact game script, Jamal Williams outscored DeAndre Swift. They both had great games, but Jamal Williams got there. Now he got there through unusual efficiency in terms of how he got there. But, in a one-game slate, anything can go.
Sure. Okay. Wide receiver and tight end gets really interesting. I want to start with Drew this time because Drew was talking so much about Marquez Valdes-Scantling. In week 1, Marquez Valdes-Scantling comes out and gets 8 targets. Of course, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, because he's not very good, only got 17 yards on those 8 targets. I assume you want to go back here in a far better matchup now where we expect Aaron Rodgers to play better.
Well, it's not always Marquez Valdes-Scantling's fault. A lot of those were prayer yards in the air yards. Aaron Rodgers just overthrowing and in tough opportunities. But yeah, I think he's going to be a bigger part of the offense this year. I think what was really interesting was just how. And I think one of the funniest things about week 1 and the Packers' struggles was that Randall Cobb didn't play at all. The guy that Aaron Rodgers basically requested, trade me. And I can only imagine Aaron Rodgers looking at the tape and looking at the coaching staff and just being like, this is why we sucked. We sucked because Randall Cobb wasn't on the field. So it's one little narrative that I'm slightly concerned about, is just the fact that Rodgers throws a hissy fit about Cobb not being on the field, and we see a little bit less of MVS and Lazard tonight. But I think he's obviously got the really, really big play potential, and he's a guy that can turn the slate pretty quickly with one big play. And so I think he's one of these guys as well that, if you're building with him, you can build these limited Packers builds through him and assume that he hits in a way that's a really big play that eliminates the kind of dink and dunk and get down the field with a lot of reception volume. And so I think MVS, much like Aaron Jones, much like A.J. Dillon, I think they're interesting on this slate because they score their points in a way that might prevent others from scoring points, just because of the nature of the drives. So I'm interested in MVS, but I think you want to use him in builds that are either emphasizing either Packers 5-1s where you think it's going to be an absolute onslaught, or in these 3-3s that are a little bit more balanced.
Cody, handling Devontae Adams, I think, is a key to this slate. Everybody is going to want to play Devontae Adams here. Such a monster in full PPR. DraftKings. How would you handle him tonight? I believe, do we have him with the highest captain ownership projection tonight? Let me check.
Yeah, I think we do, and if we don't, we should. But
20%
to 18, yeah. And honestly, we're probably going to be a little bit light there. Just going through ownership projections yesterday, the salaries are actually pretty efficient because of the top three guys on Green Bay. They're going to soak up so much ownership, but you have so many cheap options on Detroit that you can just jam in that these high end Packers guys are going to catch a lot of ownership. So I would expect Devontae to come in maybe slightly north of that 20% number. I've talked about this a lot, but I think an interesting thing you can do with Devontae Adams and these high volume guys that account for so much of their team's production is to play them without their quarterback. Then I should be clear, like those lineups don't win as often as lineups that play captain wide receiver plus their quarterback in the flex. But when they do win, they're much more unique. So like if you're playing Adams tonight and you're trying to find a way to be different, if you just exclude Aaron Rodgers in those lineups and just assume that he soaks up 50 or 60% of the team's total reception volume or receiving production, then you can be unique in that sense where 75% of the field or even closer to 100% of the field that has captain Adams also has Rodgers in the same lineup. So I think that's one way to think about it. If I'm running 150 and I've got 25% Adams at captain, I won't be doing it in every lineup, but I will reserve a certain percentage of those lineups just in case that happens. And then sometimes Rodgers can play well and the salaries just don't work out. So it's an interesting concept there with Adams, but obviously you're going to want to have captain exposure to him just given the type of ceiling that he has.
Andrew says it's such a narrative heavy slate. Who even needs projections? Now you're speaking my language, Andrew. That's what we call IKB. I know better. Tight ends. I mean, given the situation in Detroit's wide receivers, you could call TJ Hawkinson their number one wide receiver. You could call DeAndre Swift maybe their number two wide receiver. Like it's that bad for them at pass catcher. And so you get into a spot where TJ Hawkinson and Swift, I think, are going to be really owned. And I think we could be even a little light here on Hawkinson's ownership maybe as well. I don't know though, Dink. Like these guys are like the first and second targets. What do you think about Hawkinson tonight? He's certainly not cheap.
Well, that's the big thing is the opportunity cost that you get into in terms of lineups that you build, and he's gonna come in after Aaron Rodgers, after Devontae Adams, after Aaron Jones in terms of priorities. So I think he's pretty interesting. I think there's two options that I think to me stand out as like the best captain plays relative to the way the field expects to be utilizing other players, and Hawkinson's one of them. We saw just exceptional volume in week one. We know that targets are something that you have to earn, and we know that the wide receivers that Detroit is running out there are guys that have historically not played at the NFL level in a position to try to earn targets, whereas Hawkinson has. And so I'm pretty interested in Hawkinson. I think he's just naturally kind of the guy that gets a little bit underplayed simply because he doesn't have the same projection as Aaron Rodgers. And really, I don't think the upsides are too different. So I'm pretty interested in Hawkinson. I know that the ceiling on Rodgers just because quarterback ceilings are incredible, but just relative to how utilized the play is going to be tonight, I think Hawkinson is a pretty good target for GPP lineups.
Yeah, what do you think about Hawkinson and Tunyon tonight, Cody?
Yeah, to Drew's point, we see this so often in showdown slates, and you guys see it in main slate too. People just jam in the median projection into their optimizers, and that's how they run lineups. They don't necessarily think through ranges of outcomes, and we saw that last night with a guy like Marquise Brown. He was 11% owned last night. So he had a poor projection. He was priced pretty high, and he just didn't force his way into too many lineups. I think we might actually run into a similar situation with TJ Hawkinson tonight, where he's 9,600. He projects worse than guys on his own team like Goff and Swift, and $2,400 more than Jamal Williams, who I think people will want to play. And then he's close enough to Rodgers, Jones, and even Rodgers for that matter, that I just don't think he's going to find his way into too many lineups. I think people will talk themselves into Packers blowing this team out, trying to play two or three of those big three, and then some of these cheap wide receivers as a way to round out their lineup. So I think 25 is probably about right on Hawkinson, but honestly, it might come in even lower just based off of median projection alone. And then Tunyon, he kind of runs into the same problem. He's 6,400. He has a pretty poor median projection, but we've seen how heavily targeted he can be in the red zone and near the goal line for Aaron Rodgers. So I think if you are doing kind of Aaron Rodgers double stacks, just looking for a one-off touchdown, Tunyon can certainly get there, and I think he comes in with reasonable ownership as well.
Jake Howe brings up a good point. There's a narrative out there that Aaron Rodgers is purposefully so tilted at the Packers that he's tanking the season. So I just want to put that out there. I just want to let you know that that's out there. People think that Aaron Rodgers is purposefully going to lose, purposely play poorly so that he can be gone, hate the Packers, and stick it to the front office. Matt wants to know where TJ Hawkinson projects in the PSN model. I don't know what the PSN model is. You're going to have to explain that to me. Hot captain for the win. I don't hate it. Okay. The question I ask every time we do this, how do you view defense and kicker on this slate? Defense and kicker on this slate, I think, is at least worth discussing. Drew, defense and kicker takes.
Yeah, I think, the Green Bay defense, this is usually the type of situation where you see these defenses get a little bit overutilized by the field. And I don't think that's actually going to be the case too badly here. I think they're going to be at least within range. Sometimes with these really heavy favorites, you start to see the defenses utilized in like the 25 to 30% range. I don't think they're going to get all the way up there simply because I think people are going to want to use more of the skill players, and then I think some of the kickers as well. They also fall into a little bit of a weird salary price area at that 5,000 mark. So I think they're okay. I don't think they're great. They're not a starting point for me by any means, but I think they're okay. I don't think they're like X out and kind of move on type situation. Probably from the captain spot, you probably X them out because I don't think they have that kind of upside with the point totals we expect in this game. But I think they can be used. The kickers, I think, are definitely in play. Especially when you get these situations where the projections towards the bottom end of the salary tier are all players that are really muddled in terms of opportunity and could be like splitting snaps and different things like that with the Detroit wide receiver rotation. I think the kickers are very, very much in play here tonight because like 8 or 9 points could absolutely end up in the optimal.
Yep, totally agree. Cody, any kicker and defense takes, or are you ready to move to everybody's favorite portion of the program, the flag plants?
No, I think Drew nailed it. Let's get to it.
Steven is laughing about the white PSM. Don't be ridiculous, Steven. Okay. All right. I mean, I got to say, guys, it hasn't been the best season for me so far, but flag plants on this show have been absolutely fire. I will let you guys go first, though. Drew, try not to take an air ball. What are we going with tonight?
If I can go first, I'm going towards the top of the pecking order tonight. I'm not messing around. Marquez Valdes-Scantling could get me an air ball, so I gotta avoid him. My flag plan tonight would be Aaron Jones. I think you can build some of the best lineups that will be unique or differentiated. Maybe not unique with Showdown, but differentiated and lower dupes with Aaron Jones captains that play kind of these 3-3 Green Bay and Detroit pieces. And I think if Aaron Jones is the captain, if he's the one generating all the touchdowns, I do think they lend themselves to those types of game environment where it's a little bit lighter on other players on Green Bay scoring the points. I think that's the best way to approach the slate and try to be unique and differentiate from the field and increase that expected ROI for when you do win, you win a little bit more than like $1,500 because you've duped everybody else in the field. So Aaron Jones is my flag plan tonight.
Okay, before we get to Cody, Dan says, any favorite props tonight? We're showing a slight bet, which now wasn't good enough for us to actually release as a play, but we're showing a slight bet on Aaron Rodgers under 25.5 pass completions in this game. I thought was somewhat interesting. That was pretty much one of the only ones that we were showing a bet on, if any, but we actually didn't take it. So it's not an official play. Kyle says that, Slayton dropped that second touchdown. Dink should get mucho credit for that one, buddy. It's got to be official. No
Sklansky Bucks, baby. Just rolling in them.
Tom Kennedy season. Shout out to Team Preseason. Tom Kennedy was a star for us in week 2, I believe it was, of #Team Preseason.
Now we're talking your language.
Now we're talking. Make Dusty Cobb relevant narrative. Maybe Aaron Rodgers wants to make Randall Cobb relevant tonight. Do we have a favorite Detroit wide receiver? We kind of glossed over Detroit wide receivers. Cody, if you had to pick one Detroit wide receiver to play, who would it be?
I mean, you talk about this all the time, that earning targets is a skill, and I know it's a one-game sample, but Quintez Cephas was the only guy that really earned targets. Everybody else was complete dust on that Lions wide receiver core. So with Khalif Raymond active, it's going to eat into a little bit to his expected snaps if he were to sit, but if he's banged up, I love that. Obviously, Tyrell Williams is out, so Quintez Cephas should play more, and he was the best at earning targets in week 1. So, like Quintez Cephas.
Yeah, Don wants his Skalansky bucks for the Jonathan Taylor goal line carries yesterday. Also, Dan says, do you even have to play a Detroit wide receiver? Certainly not. I don't think so.
No.
I mean, no, certainly do not have to. All right, Cody, go ahead with your flag plan.
Yeah, I think we just lean into Drew's narrative that Aaron Jones is going to control things for Green Bay. They're going to run quite a few rushing attempts in the second half, and then we get a lot of play action. We get a lot of pass volume from the Lions. So I'm going to go with T.J. Hawkinson. I think he's got the best route of any Lions pass catcher to that 10-101 type game. So even if he does it in garbage time or come from behind when they're down 21. Doesn't matter. The points count the same. So, give me T.J. Hawkinson.
All right. I was going to say Aaron Jones, but I graciously allowed Dink to go first. So instead, my backup plan is something nobody's going to like. It's not going to be fun. Mason Crosby will be in the opposite.
Oh, my God.
Mason Crosby
my God. We're flag planting kickers.
Mason Crosby will be in the optimal tonight. Minimum 10 DraftKings points.
Oh, my gosh.
For Mason Crosby tonight. All right. Buddy. Exactly.
The first ever kicker flag plan by established run team members.
I'm honestly kind of getting tired of actually talking about these slates. We should just come on here and answer questions and do flag plans. That really should be the whole show. Nobody actually wants to listen to the other stuff. Okay, go Mason Crosby tonight. Not Captain Mason Crosby. In the flex will be.
Very important to distinguish.
He's giving the takes like Larry David too. In the flex, Captain. Not Captain, in the flex, Mason Crosby.
God. We're running the Sims on that. Initial data is no. Kickers are not affected by the age model. Levitan not popping the PSM anymore. Buddy, tonight's got nothing to do with that. All right. For Cody, for Dink, for producer Adam, good luck, everybody.